A young man awoke with a start, only to find himself surrounded by opulence he'd never known before. The golden embroidery, velvet drapes, and glittering ornaments overwhelmed his senses. Panic surged through him like electricity. "Your Highness." "Can you see me now?" A loud voice broke the silence and nearly sent Lihan tumbling off the bed. The stranger's sudden cry made his heart pound, but confusion still clouded his mind. He blinked, staring at the man who looked half ecstatic, half terrified. Who are you?" Lihan asked warily. The man seemed stunned, as if he'd just heard a foreign language. Then, slapping his chest in a dramatic display of loyalty, he exclaimed, "Surely you jest, Your Highness. I am P.O. Garden, your personal physician. I've served you for years, and I shall continue to do so until my final breath." Lihan didn't know what to say. Everything this man was saying sounded utterly deranged. Was this some kind of performance? A prank? Maybe the guy had completely lost it. But right now, Lihan had a more immediate problem. His mouth felt like sandpaper. "Water," he rasped. Garden darted out like a man on fire and returned almost instantly, holding a goblet so ornate it looked like it belonged in a museum. Gold vines entwined around embedded rubies, sapphires, and a large emerald crowning the base. Lihan eyed the goblet suspiciously. It didn't seem like costume jewelry. It was heavy, cold to the touch, and reeked of wealth. As he cautiously took a sip, something caught his attention. A massive mirror hanging directly in front of him. And then his heart stopped. The face, staring back at him, was a stranger's. Angular cheekbones, pale complexion, silver white hair. It wasn't his. He didn't know this person. The shock made him choke violently, coughing up water as Garden shrieked again, loud enough to rival the sirens Lihan was used to hearing during his hospital shifts. The man scrambled to grab a towel, fussing like a panicked mother hen. In the midst of the chaos, Lihan's thoughts began to realign. Wait a minute. This setting, this body, the name Rael Adria Maganto, echoed in his head like a bell. He'd read about all of this. In fact, it was from that ridiculous web novel he drunkenly finished before his impromptu swim in the Han River. It clicked. He hadn't died. He hadn't been rescued either. Somehow, impossibly, he had crossed over into the world of a fictional novel. A bizarre, absurd twist of fate had made him part of a fantasy plot. What kind of cursed narrative was this? Lihan couldn't accept it. He needed confirmation. "Garden, slap me!" The doctor reeled back, horrified. I beg your pardon? I would never to strike His Highness. Unthinkable!" With no other options, Lihan gritted his teeth and smacked himself hard across the face. The sting was real. Too real. Nope, not a dream. He was now Rael Adria Maganto, the sickly crown prince from Demon Sword Emperor Rael. All of his crushing student loans and failed clinic ambitions? Gone. A prince now, rich, pampered. For a brief, euphoric moment, he considered breaking into a celebratory dance, maybe even Gunam style, just for irony's sake. But then, without warning, the world tilted. The room swam around him, and his knees gave way. Garden rushed to support him before he crumpled. That's when Lihan finally understood the body he was inhabiting. Weak, not tired, not under the weather. Chronically, tragically weak. His mind scoured the novel's storyline. Rael wasn't just a minor side character. He was a tragic footnote. Born sick, lived weaker than a wilted daisy, and died at 22. How old am I now? Lihan's voice quivered. Garden blinked, then responded cheerfully. You are 21, Your Highness. Lihan's heart dropped like a stone into a bottomless well. Just 1 year. 1 year left before this body was fated to expire. He muttered a quiet curse. He had thought being the crown prince meant a new lease on life. No debts, no sleepless nights, no endless rotations at the hospital. But now, he was shackled to a countdown. The best healers, the finest mages, even priests had already tried everything in the original story, and none of it worked. But Lihan wasn't going to just roll over and die. He curled his fists tight. If no one else could save him, then he would save himself. "Garden," he said firmly, "bring me the sharpest needles you can find." The doctor gawked. "Needles? Now." Despite being baffled, Garden obeyed, returning with a tray of ornate golden acupuncture needles, each as long as a finger. Far too large. Lihan sifted through them, choosing the thinnest one. It would still hurt, but it would have to do. As he heated the needle over an open flame, Garden shifted anxiously, eyes darting. "Your Highness, may I ask what you intend to do with those?" the man whispered. Lihan's voice was steady. "I'm going to insert them into my body." Garden's face drained of color. No, please, Your Highness. You are in pain, I understand, but harming yourself is not the answer. You're the heir to the throne. This is madness." "It's not what you think," Lihan replied calmly. "I'm not doing this out of despair. I'm doing this to live. If it doesn't work, you can lock me up. But if it does, you'll trust me from now on." The conviction in his voice silenced Garden. He still looked terrified, but he no longer protested. Lihan stripped off his robe and lay on his stomach, focusing on his breathing. He had to start with the lungs. Without air, there could be no life. He positioned the needle above the key respiratory meridian, Hantin, and pushed it in. The fun. Pain was sharp, and he groaned, but gritted through it. Next was the arm's convergence point, but just as he prepared the second needle, a glowing interface blinked into existence before his eyes. Lines of text scrolled across the floating window. "Your body is responding positively to your acupuncture. Internal organ function shows minor recovery. Lung activity increasing." Lihan's breath caught, not from illness this time, but wonder. Oxygen rushed through his system like never before. His chest rose and fell more freely. Blood surged with life. A new notification chimed in his mind. Acupuncture success. More 100 HP. Current HP, 100. And just like that, Crown Prince Rael, once a name doomed to wither, had taken his first real step toward survival, and maybe, just maybe, toward rewriting the entire story. Rael stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the flickering virtual window. His eyes didn't blink, his breathing shallow, as if the shimmering display before him contained a secret only he could see. Slowly, almost absently, he extended his hand toward it. The moment dragged on in surreal silence as his fingers moved in midair, grasping at nothing, swiping gently like trying to catch an invisible insect. Watching this bizarre scene unfold, Garden broke into a cold sweat. There was clearly nothing there, yet Rael continued to move his hand around, searching for something only he could perceive. It was hard to blame Garden for suspecting that the Crown Prince had finally lost his mind. Just as Rael's eyes began to mist over, seemingly on the verge of another emotional breakdown, he paused and spoke with a trace of exasperation. "Garden, I'm not crazy," he said firmly. "Don't overreact." Trying to ground himself, Rael picked up another acupuncture needle and deftly pressed it into the Yemen acupoint. Despite the tip still being unnervingly large, his body had begun to adjust to the sharp pain. The spasm in his chest, a familiar agony, eased slightly as the needle hit its mark. He continued, placing more needles, each sting sharper than the last. The repeated strain of substandard tools was beginning to wear on him more than he had expected. Garden, meanwhile, stood by, lips moving in silent prayer. In his eyes, the young prince of the Maganto royal family was self-destructing, and the worst part was, Garden couldn't do a thing about it. Rael, watching his loyal attendant kneeling beside the bed, muttering anxiously, felt slightly helpless. Even if he tried to explain, Garden wouldn't understand. So instead, Rael focused on his work, repeating the process at key points: Shabai, Tanfu, Kungu, Chiki. One by one, he opened the meridians, enduring the pain with disciplined resolve. Relief swept over him. The piercing pain faded, replaced by a surprising sense of weightlessness, as though he were reclined on a luxurious massage chair. Yet despite the fleeting comfort, vitality still eluded him. With a deep breath, he drove the needle into the chai acupoint. Success. The left lung meridians had been fully activated. Rael's body didn't just relax, it rejoiced. His lungs, long dormant under years of disease, now seemed almost celebratory. It was strange, even absurd. Rael didn't fully grasp how the HP system worked, how something so unscientific could be so effective. But he didn't have much time to dwell on that. Before he could even recover, his large intestines seemed to react too, stirred into activity by the ongoing internal awakening. A loud, comical message flashed across the simulation interface, practically mocking his years of medical training. Insulting or not, it worked. The partially revived large intestine earned him 100 horsepower. His lungs, far more enthusiastic, contributed another 200. His total now stood at 600 horsepower, enough to unlock his first skill. When he saw the list of unlockable skills, Rael's heart raced like a child discovering magic for the first time. Sword beams from slashes, fire from staffs, fantasy powers straight out of a novel. But what appeared before him wasn't quite that dramatic. 10 skills. Take pulse, acupuncture, cupping, abusen, herbal tonic preparation, herb identification, herb hunting, brewing medicinal liquor, charging medical fees, Azon core technique. Rael's excitement dimmed a bit. These were hardly grand or explosive. As a seasoned practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine, he had already mastered these in his previous life. Still, he had to choose one. And for a doctor, any doctor, everything begins with diagnosis. He selected Take Pulse without hesitation. A proper diagnosis is the first and most crucial step to any treatment. Unlocking the skill cost him 500 horsepower, reducing his remaining balance to 100. A new status screen blinked into view. The system confirmed he had successfully acquired the Level 1 Take Pulse skill. From now on, by reading someone's pulse, Rael could accurately evaluate their health status. The system would even generate a full health report. First subject? Himself. He reached out and checked his own pulse. No more guessing, no more rough self-diagnosis. The system took over, and soon a chilling report popped up. Height, 176 cm. Weight, 53 car. Internal organ ratings, all F. The total health score, trash. Estimated remaining lifespan, 991 days. Rael blinked, stunned. He'd suspected. This body was frail, but not this fragile. Only 991 days left. That was barely enough to finish a treatment cycle, let alone rebuild an entire life. Quickly, he adjusted his breathing, rotated the needles clockwise, then softened the pressure before withdrawing them carefully. He followed the proper drainage technique to support the respiratory response. As he pulled the final needle, the screen updated. His lifespan had increased from 91 days to 92. Encouraged, Rael repeated the procedure on the other side of his body. But the result this time was far less hopeful. A sudden wave of nausea surged through him. He coughed violently. Blood splattered from his lips. A red warning window appeared. System alert. Excessive acupuncture. Body overloaded. Limit, 3 sessions per week. Garden, who had been standing silently nearby, panicked. His prince was vomiting blood again. He looked ready to cry. Rael ignored him for now. His mind raced. Of course, he had been so overjoyed with the progress that he forgot the most basic principle. Acupuncture cannot solve everything. It only works when the patient's body is strong enough to handle the strain. Right now, his body was too frail. According to the system, He could only safely perform acupuncture every 3 days. That meant a mere 1-day increase in lifespan every 3 days. At this pace, he'd only gain 10 extra days in a month. Still, not enough. He'd die just like the original novel's outcome. He needed something more potent, a faster, more reliable solution. And that meant one thing: herbal medicine. Starting tomorrow, he would begin incorporating medicinal tonics. Garden, of course, would be his errand boy. Rael recalled that the royal apothecary likely held rare and powerful herbs. What he needed most right now was something strong, something like wolf's bane root. Garden stared at him when he made the request. Wolf's bane, he echoed, eyes wide. Yes, Rael replied calmly. I need it, to eat. Garden went pale. Then, without warning, he dropped to his knees, tears welling in his eyes. Again, Rael groaned internally. Why did every dramatic request have to make this guy cry? He tried to reassure him. This is part of the treatment. Bring me the root within 5 minutes or I won't make it. Garden hesitated, eyes clouded with uncertainty. But after a long pause, he nodded and dashed off. Rael smirked. He'd figured out Garden's weakness, mention his impending death, and Garden would do anything to help. Still, he understood the hesitation. Wolf's bane was highly toxic. Even in modern medicine, everyone knew of its dangers. But Rael wasn't a novice. There were 2 types of wolf's bane roots, and what he needed was the smaller one, roulet. This root, in its raw form, could cause cardiac arrest. But Rael knew how to detoxify and neutralize it. With the right method, that poison could become a powerful medicine. Despite Rael's confident explanation, Garden remained visibly unconvinced. I've never heard of anything like that, he admitted quietly. I don't know where you learned this, but if it might help you recover, then I'll follow you to the end. He left the prince's quarters with a candle in hand, eyes glinting with reluctant determination. In truth, Rael's explanation hadn't done much to calm him. But what else could they do? The crown prince's condition was only worsening, and conventional medicine had failed. They had to try something new. Garden resolved silently that once the detoxification was done, he would try it first, before letting Rael take a single sip. As the door closed, Rael grinned with anticipation. Tomorrow wasn't soon enough. With the wolf's bane root finally within reach, his journey of creating potent tonics would begin tonight. Rael leaned over the small iron stove, carefully watching the strange mixture boil. A pungent, unnatural aroma filled the room. Bitter, sharp, laced with the subtle burn of toxicity. It was the kind of smell that clung to the walls and made even seasoned healers hesitate. Garden, hovering nearby, sniffed the air repeatedly, unease tightening his features. The concoction was derived from ingredients no ordinary physician would dare touch. The underlying poison in them made his stomach churn. His instincts screamed that this was madness. Suddenly, as Rael turned to adjust the flame, Garden lunged forward, gripping his arm with desperate urgency. Your Highness, I beg you think this through. Please don't do this. Rael flinched in surprise. A wicked thought crossed his mind, half jest, half challenge. If you're that worried, Garden, he said, unable to resist a sly grin, why don't you try it first? He meant it as a joke, a little scare to make Garden back off. But to his astonishment, Garden's eyes darkened with resolve. As you command, Your Highness. Rael blinked. Wasn't this man supposed to be a coward? Then again, in the original novel, Garden had been depicted as nothing less than fiercely loyal. Despite not being a high-ranking physician, he'd remained, with the crown prince long after all other healers had abandoned hope. And after the prince's untimely death, it was Garden who bore the blame, unjustly, and paid with his life. Watching him now prepare to sacrifice himself again without hesitation made something stir in Rael's chest. This man, who had never betrayed or faltered, deserved more than to be scapegoated. Maybe, Rael thought. His survival shouldn't be his only priority. Maybe saving Garden's future could also be a part of his new path. Still, he wasn't ready to share everything. The medicine was complex and time-consuming to brew, and Garden's suggestion to test it himself struck Rael as both noble and foolish. No sense in wasting a dose. Besides, Rael didn't want to share his good things so easily, not when they were this hard-won. Let it cool first, Rael advised with practiced calm. Testing it while it's still hot won't do any good. Garden obeyed, though his curiosity was clearly growing. How did you learn about these herbs? He finally asked. Rael's pulse quickened. If Garden suspected the truth, that Rael's soul didn't belong to this world, it would raise questions he couldn't answer. Thinking fast, he spun a tale. A dream, he said solemnly. Each night, a magician visits me. He saw my weakness and took pity on me. He gave me the formula. This is his gift. It was a ridiculous story, even to his own ears. But Garden, for all his skepticism, nodded slowly. The man wanted to believe. As Garden turned away, still mulling over the dream, Rael seized the moment. With the swiftness of a thief stealing treasure, he lifted the bowl and drank the medicine. In a single gulp, Garden gasped, "Your Highness!" But it was already too late. The bitter fluid had burned its way down Rael's throat, and within seconds his body erupted in chaos. His heart thundered, as if trying to escape his chest. The pain was sharp and blinding, but Rael gritted his teeth. He refused to believe. His medicine could betray him. Moments later, the system chimed in. The mixture had worked. Not only had it driven out the cold and pain lingering in his body, it had stimulated his metabolism and, most surprisingly, awakened the dormant Azron energy core. Rael stared, stunned. The Azron core. A legendary technique passed down only through the royal bloodline of Maganto, created by the famed swordmaster Javier Azron and his liege, Lord Frona. It was a mark of royal inheritance. This body, weak as it was, had indeed belonged to the rightful heir. Now awakened, the first level of the Azron core formed a glowing ring around Rael's heart, absorbing and circulating mana. It felt as though something warm and powerful was moving through him for the very first time. For a single, blissful second, Rael wanted to shout in triumph, but that moment vanished in an instant. Pain returned, violent and crushing. The porcelain bowl shattered from his trembling grip. Rael collapsed, clutching his chest as the mana ring constricted, tightening like a noose around his heart. "Your Highness!" Garden rushed forward, but Rael was already slipping from consciousness. The system screamed warnings in red text. Heart and mana core imbalance detected. Risk of cardiac failure imminent.